I've watched myself become hypnotized by influencers, right? Like I fell into this guy, Mitch Harper's info funnel. He co-founded BigCommerce. So I thought he moved up market against Shopify, and I was trying to move up market in email. I'm like, this is the guy. And I ended up paying $4,000 a month to this guy for an hour of his time. And like, he was basically a therapist that I could have paid, $150 an hour for.
What's a big mistake I think that a lot of people make is trying to do too much at once. You have to spend at least like months trying to figure it out, man. Like it took me like a year before I started getting it.
Audience, you heard two people say it. It took me a year before it clicked also.
I'm bullish obviously on this whole founder brand thing, right? And I think it's on LinkedIn, it's arbitrage right now.
Like if I reflect on my journey as an entrepreneur, I now know what I'm good at. And the things that I know I'm good at, I'm so much better than I was 10 years ago that it's not even funny. I would not give that person 10 years ago $1 to go do anything.
We actually jammed on this at dinner the other week, and Chris is big LinkedIn. Like he built his whole agency on LinkedIn. Him and I are sharing some tactics, and he's starting to do some Instagram. He's starting to just from his perspective, Instagram. And then also he's done well, I think on TikTok. He's just sticking with, I think he gets the most business from LinkedIn. Play around with Instagram a bit, but still he's mostly just LinkedIn. And Twitter, I think he's on my side where he's not a huge fan of Twitter, neither am I. But
yeah.
Like I'm on there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like not your audience either. The deed is we talked about this. Like I tried to engage with people on Twitter because like whatever, it's just not set. It's like if Chris would have if his audience were on Twitter and he did his whole thing on Twitter, it would not work as well as it does on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is set up to fundamental. Like people inbound connection request you. If you accept them, they get served your content before anything else. It's a little more long form. Yeah. It just leads to a much better lead gen motion than Twitter does.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what, it's like, I think because we have this B2B product, I just need to do roughly what he's right. Like create this text and video persona on LinkedIn that is evangelizing this new way of doing out, right? And hopefully that ripples through, hopefully I activate Santosh, who's my COO and like the god of B2B data, and Diana, who's my CRO. I can activate them all. And this can be like a version of like, let's say the Gong playbook where they just showed up and that company nail it so hard on this. Just like a different version. And I think it's because we can get away with it because like we have this perspective. Like if you look at some of the stuff I've reposted from Santosh, like who can say when I joined Zoom Info, they were stuck at 8 million in revenue for 9 years. I was VP product strategy and growth. And when I left, they were at, here are the 5 things right? Of course it got 1,000 likes, right? Like no one else can say that, right? And like no one else can sort of sit there from my position and be like, look, I tried to make this BDR. I'm bootstrapped 20 million ARR in 3 years. I'm not a fucking moron. Yeah. Like, here's why I don't think it did. And like, here's what I'm doing that kind of is working with like 10% of the expense, right? Like, and by the way, it feels good to make money. And then, as we talked about last time, there's all these people that jump down your throat. But like, I have this great one I think's going up today. One of my friends is a BDR at like, I'm not going to say what company, but like everyone knows it. They've raised almost $1 billion. People in B2B use it. Like they know the company. And I sent her this post I'm going to write about like all of the reasons that I think BDR sucks for the BDR and sucks for the executive team. Because it's like the way we're solving the drop in response rate problem is by spamming more, which is causing even lower response rates and making it even harder for great personalization. Yeah. And I think great personalization can still work, by the way. Qualified sent this guy, Kyle. They figured out he's a Post Malone fan and they sent him this incredible email that like use references to their product that are all Post Malone. Awesome. But like, you got to get him to open that. You got to get him to open that. Yeah. First, like, right? That's the problem. So like, I sort of had this post that like very clearly articulated pain that results from all this. And it's like, at the end of the day, the most painful thing is the BDR managers telling each rep to book 3 demos and they're booking 1. And then the executives going to the BDR manager and being like, why'd your team miss by 2/3? And They're like, what are you going to do to improve next week? And the answer is always more activity, because what the fuck else can you do? Right. Like that's just the only thing you do, which makes the problem in aggregate even worse.
Yeah.
And then you have like AI and automation. It's like, it's just, it can't be solved. Right. It can't like this. So like the age of personalization is just getting, it is good. It is diminishing. Right. So like my whole thing with my friend was, I was like, dude, read this. He's like, sing on, and he's like, to be honest, by Friday every week, my soul is crushed. I'm like, that's just like a really sad thing. Why? And he's like, the repetition is unbearable. Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking like, why would you have a job that a North American rep is doing that is so repetitive that it's soul? Why does that exist in the world? Right. Like, and you don't want that at your company. Like you don't want your employees saying that about their job. Right. So if it can be done another way, if there were literally no other way, right. If you like have to pull iron ore out of the ground, right. Like, so, but like there's another way. So anyway, I was like, what did you do today? So the answer was, I get this report from Salesforce every day. I look through the opens, right? That like align with my 60 accounts or whatever they have me focusing on. And it's Prime Day. So we're sending them gift cards. That's all I'm doing today. So I'm like, why is there a team of reps in the US doing this job? Yeah. Right? So my vision for this, and we're working with a guy like this on a consulting basis, but like I would imagine that in a year or two, we have somebody in-house. I hate to use this word, but there's this like B2B spammer maestro who is just the best at it and understands and is super high paid, understands every part of it. And that person across email and LinkedIn and whatever channel you're using, they're casting this super wide net because the net has to be cast, right? Yeah. But like Chris says, the demand is getting created elsewhere. People are doing 70% of their research. They're making up their mind on one or two vendors before they raise their hand. Yeah. Right. So like you're kind of wasting your time trying to engage them before they want to be engaged, which is what the BDR operation is. Right. So like, I think the future is there's this one guy who literally is constantly doing things like, oh, well, today we're going to send Amazon gift cards. And like, tomorrow we're going to set up this phone bot does this or like whatever. And that actually is a very thrilling job in my opinion. Yeah. It's so not repetitive. Yeah. It's more right? Creative. And then you have another guy. Yeah. You have it. And it's one person and they make $500,000 a year or something. And that's what that job is. Right. But they're like capturing all of this demand that 20 people were before. And then you have somebody else who's just like dealing with the replies. Right. And that's not a bad job either, because what's so painful about it was the guy's like, dude, it was 3 p.m. He's like, I haven't gotten a response. It's just like soul, right? It's just like soul crushing, you know? And so I actually made that whole conversation into a post that I made a Chris Walker style video for, where I'm like looking at the left. So it should hit later today. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this.
So I'll give you my thought. Like the first thing is if you can't land in the inbox, your subject line doesn't matter and your body in the email doesn't. And so even $1 billion companies, I've worked with all these B2B companies on setting up outreach or go to market, more than just setting up outreach, but how it ties in all to market and blah, blah, blah. And I would say, and I'm not going to call anyone else specifically, no one has the correct way of doing email setup. Right? I won't get into specifics with their SPF records, their DKIM, their DMARC, basically warming up email domains, all this stuff. They're doing all of their cold emailing on their main domain, which is just trashing in most regards, their main domain, especially if they're not a big name brand, right? Because what's happening is they're all landing in spam. People are blocking people. I was at a CEO event last week and it was for, we just got some investment from the fund and anyways, we were there and, CEO of Trustpilot was there, CEO of a bunch of big Austin companies. And I won't name them specifically, but, you were talking to people and I was talking to them about outbound because they wanted my perspective. They're like, oh, outreach, like, what do you think's happening? Yeah. And I go, to be quite honest with you, everyone's so worried about personalization and subject lines and bodies and talking about how to write a cold email, but they're not focusing on what the main problem, which is they're not even getting in the inbox right now. Right. And so all this stuff doesn't even matter. It's like you're talking about how to like go on a run when you can't even walk yet. Right. Like you can't even walk yet. So what I said there is like, they were like, well, how do we fix that? And so I kind of walked them through the technical side, and I'm sure your email guru is doing this, but that is what a lot of these companies are missing. right? And some people will start to say, well, when you do that whole thing and create multiple domains and you're sending through multiple domains, you're a spammer, right? Like they're saying it's spam. And I'm like, no, that's not spam. That's just how the game is now played. The rules of the game are always changing, you know? Like
totally. And by the way, that's one change at Gmail away from not working.
Yeah, exactly. And then that might not work, I mean? Right? And so this relates to what you were saying, which is having that one person, let's call it the growth hacker or whatever, on focusing on what is our next arbitrage, right? And if you look at all of these companies that like grew at a crazy rate at some point, a lot of them had that one channel that just worked for them when the time was right. You know, I was at Outreach. You know what worked for us? We built Outreach. It was cold email. We grew like crazy. Why? Because that was arbitrage when you were able to demand with what's the next channel, right? And you actually called this out, which is the next channel, dude, is content. Like it is content and content creators.
1,000,000%.
Right. And so going back on this, I had an idea and I actually wanted to jam with you on this, but like, this is a crazy idea that I have.
Can we not leave getting in the inbox until I get your full list?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So getting in the inbox is the biggest problem, bigger problem than personalization, bigger problem than subject line. Number one, you said was people's setup is not correct fundamentally. So what that means is they're using a tool like SalesLoft and they have not put in their DMARC and SPF. They have not authorized SalesLoft to authenticate those emails in the eyes of Gmail. And by the way, they're getting more strict about it, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to use your domain. It just means that the domain you're using has to be authentic or you're going to get blocked by everybody.
Yeah. And going,
so that's number one.
That's number one.
Right. And then you said number two, it's a travesty to send off of your main domain because ultimately what you are doing is spamming, and that will ultimately, email is a game of reputation. Reputation is slow to build and it is fast to lose. Yeah. Right. And you want to keep the stuff going off of your domain so that when your salespeople are following up or whatever, pristine.
Yes. For many purposes, you want to keep your main domain protected, right? Like, and
what else is there?
The other part of this, and this is a bigger thing, is if you look at these people I were talking to, like yourself, CEOs, right? I was like, well, what do you do with all these emails that you get? And they're like, honestly, I select all if I don't know who it's from, and I block and I mark as spam. They block them. They literally block the email. Like they're blocking at this point, right? So, and then I go, well, what do you do if like it's something that you would be interested in? And one guy gave me a great perspective. He's like, if it's that important, something that's a priority and that I'd be interested in, someone on my team will come to me that I need to, right?
Yeah. So the third problem is that I'll tell you what I do. I don't hit spam. I drag all of them into my updates folder in Gmail. Whenever I get a string that's coming from Outreach or whatever, I just drag them into Outreach, or I drag them into updates so they're all there. But people effectively make it so they're not receiving them, right? So like, what do you do to get around that?
That is a great question, right? And this is where
we don't have the answer
yet. We don't know. Like the hypothesis is, let's do more cold calling. That's the first thing people are doing now, right? Well, guess what's happening now with cold call? I don't ever answer from a number. Apple put a thing like, don't even give me phone calls from people I don't know, right?
Dude, yeah. My thing literally doesn't even ring. Like people are like, dude, your phone says it's disconnected. I'm like, that's amazing. Like if you need to talk to me bad enough, you can figure out how to do it, you know? And like, that was what you said about hearing something that we should be doing also. It's like, it's kind of like my I don't read the news because I don't want to be a depressed human being.
Yeah. I'm
right.
with you.
If something's important enough, like I heard that there was a war in Israel. Yeah. Right. So like I go read a couple articles about it. Right. So like I think the same thing can be said for B2B SaaS. If the thing is good enough, like I didn't go research Gong. I didn't even know I wanted it. Yeah. Right. But like people were like, dude, you got to check out this Gong thing for sales. You know, it records all their calls and you can tag stuff and whatever. So more cold calling happens, but also it's like this is the Chris Walker thing. What we're doing right now, even if 15 people listen to it, all it takes is one to make it worth it for me. Yeah. You know, one of the right. So like, this is why I'm trying to A, do all this stuff on LinkedIn that I'm doing, and B, spend at least a day a week doing this. Yeah. Right. Like speaking to people who either have audiences that I can get in front of who might be relevant or who are actual revenue leaders struggling with this thing where it's giving me more tactical advice to share with my audience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just like what I want to spend. That is content. It's like the revelation from studying Chris was like, he's having people pull it out of him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's like conversations like this are what's driving that machine, right? And it gets done really efficiently because of it.
And one thing there that's interesting is, one thing that I see is like when you find a channel that works, and I think right now a great channel is content creation, getting stuff on video, all that stuff. And then when you find something that's working and that's kind of at an advantage right now, if you can do it right, how do you get better at it? Volume, which is what cold email used to be, right? I used to say, plug in an SDR, reverse engineer. If we get 10 SDRs, we can get this many more replies. Well, now the game is content. And so how do you arbitrage? How do you make it arbitrage? More volume. So I think what you're doing, that's what I'm doing now. I'm doing the exact same thing. How do I do more of it? And how do I get more out? Because all it takes is this one to get you, move the needle a little bit. But you can't plan that. Is kind of the the thing. You can get lots of likes and views and whatever. And this goes back to an idea I have, which is instead of hiring SDR, and this might be one of my first, I'm not kidding. I'm going to do a content development. And what we're going to figure out is basically they're a content creator for B2B. And all they're doing all day is creating content in a sequential way, right? We don't know what that sequential way is yet, but maybe it's a LinkedIn post, and that LinkedIn post is about this. Then the next is a video for whatever, this channel, this TikTok channel. The next is this. And then how do you get them to repeat that and create a repeatable process around that and putting out the right messages to the right channel? And now that is something that I'm trying to explore with, right? Now, is this a content creator? Is it an SDR that understands how to make content, right? And instead of them cold emailing and doing all this stuff, they're doing more content creation. What's that look like? I don't know yet, but that's something that I'm thinking about is how do you have an army of content creators? That's basically it, right?
Yeah, I have so much to say about
this. Tell me.
I'm in a very hypothetical stage as well. So I had this thing that happened to me maybe late last. Did you see the guy who worked at Gong, JC? He made the video. He was trying to book a demo with somebody specific. He tagged the person in the text, and he figured out the guy was trying to do a 10-minute. So he did a 10-minute plank, and in between each of the minutes, he hit a gong and gave a reason why the person should use it. And then in the comments, the dude was like, here's my Calendly link. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I know JC is a great guy.
So meanwhile, I have not really locked in to something that I deem very effective for my founder brand stuff yet, but I am observing that it is creating this impact.
Yeah.
And like, I was not a social media, right? So like, I'm like, like this BDR thing's dying. Like, as I sit here and yell this, people are like, well, then what are young salespeople going to do? Where are they going to come from? I'm like, dude, like, I think they're going to be YouTubers.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be like, kind of like if you were trying to be a musician and you're very talented, you sell out and make jingles for Procter and Gamble or whatever. Like if you're a really good YouTuber, but it's like your market can't pay your rent or whatever, it's like you're going to go into SaaS sales.
Yeah.
It's like the skill of, and like, I think the best people at it will have done, they're not just like, oh, I'm the cold plunge. It's like, well, I was the cold plunge guy. And before that, I was like the, do it yourself in the woods guy. And like before that, I was like, wash your car guy or whatever. It's like they can identify that they were able to aggregate audience based upon some content hole that existed in the world through video and monetize that across different audiences, because then it becomes compelling to enter a software company because the case could be made that this person could just understand our customer and do that, right? Across multiple platforms too. And then as they get more senior in their career, the influencer within a space becomes super valuable. Like the fact that Clary hasn't poached this guy, JC, who made that video is fucking stupid. How much could he possibly cost? He has like tens of thousands of followers that are all literally wheelhouse for them that he has aggregated. You know what I mean? So like, I think there's going to be this superstar pay disparity.
Oh yeah.
Like that is what sales is going to be, right?
Yes,
and
dude.
Like
oh
for
my
sure.
Gosh. That's
like a fucking 100%. And by the way, like I'm happy about it right now. There's another part of this that I think is not like, I have to give respect to the game and not lie to it. I think there's a reason that when I talk about sales, it's it's taken more seriously than, let's say, if Walker, our 25-year-old AE, were to talk about sales on LinkedIn. Yeah. Like, I'm coming from a position of, I am the guy who founded a company that bootstrapped 20 million ARR in 3 years. And I just went through this whole fuck job, you know, euphoria, despair. I'm working in public and it's like, people want to listen to that. So like, but that doesn't mean that everybody can't eventually aggregate a position that's worth listening to. But, you know, there's no way that one of our BDRs coming straight out of university could have started building audience as quickly as I could on these forms.
No.
Right. It's just not the right thing. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't appreciate the compounding nature of content creation and the skill in aggregating audience and the value that's going to come from that over the course of their career, because it's only getting better.
Yeah. And I feel, so going back to that one thing you said, which was like, they're going to be superstar paid. Yeah. I think you're right. I think rather than hire 10 people to do sales, they're going to hire 2 to 3 people that are these rock star creators that are going to basically be paid an exorbitant amount and get commission on the deals that come in that are tied to them. Right.
Yes.
Then that's the way sales is going to be. It's going to be like an inbound, almost sales motion. And guess what? The top reps are no longer going to be the salespeople that get lucky with a great account list in San Francisco and they're selling tech. Right. Like, we've all seen that happen before, right? Or, have a golden tongue, supposedly, right? No, it's going to be the ones that can capture attention, right? And I've actually said this, and it's an opinion that I got, people went down my sense similar to you with the whole BDR thing, which I was like, top reps are no longer going to be these people that, get the best account list. They're going to be people that know how to basically get attention, have an audience, right? Like, that's where the world's going.
Yeah.
And they're going to be paid 4 times more than a standard salesperson. Like,
I mean, this is like, it's like, if you were like, what are undervalued skills in the sales? I would say exactly what you're talking about. This ability to aggregate audience around ideas. I mean, in this case, it's like whoever the customers are that you're selling to. And then, man, I think video in general is just, in knowing how to use it the right way, is just super undervalued. It just doesn't, it's like these numbers that get shown on your video views or whatever. It's like, okay, like, let's say even 200 people watch thing, or even for 30 seconds, if 10 of them do that 5 times in a row, like, that person either loves or hates you, which is like unbelievable, right? Like, it's like you're in that person, like, they're thinking about you when you're not there. Like, it's very weird. Like, almost every conversation that I have now, and by the way, I'm doing a ton of it, like, trying to do as much as Chris. I'm doing this $1 billion challenge thing, which is different than what he's doing, but I'm also trying to do this Chris Walker style thing, right? And give people, 3 posts a week where they can watch a 3-minute take. It's also text-based, right? Like, now almost every conversation I have, people are like, I feel like I know you already. And like, that is only going to get more and more out of control. That is trust. Who do you buy from? Right? Like, it's like the one thing, it's like, and this is what I truly believe our moat is. I think we have 2 moats with this product that we're selling to salespeople. One, we understand the identity, literally how to build the identity really well. And number 2, I don't think many CEOs could compete with me and Santosh with this LinkedIn because of what I'm willing to say about our journey and where he's been in here.
Yeah. And dude, I think for you, what a great idea would be? You've probably noodled on this, but I mean, here's my strategy, right? Like, I'm basically LinkedIn, I feel good about LinkedIn right now. I'm trying to go to Instagram, and then I'm actually doing some YouTube, because the half-life of YouTube videos, it's evergreen, right? Like, it's stuff that can be evergreen topic, which is amazing. And it grows and grows and grows over time, versus like LinkedIn, it's dead after 3 days or something. So doing some YouTube, I'm doing 1 video a week there. I'm doing my 1 morning post every day on LinkedIn. And
can I ask you what is the format of the YouTube video? Is it like an 8 minute, 18 minutes?
It's going to be like around 10 to 8 minutes, right? Yeah. And then I've got like my YouTube editor who's also
educational.
So there's 3 buckets, right? My YouTube guy is kind of like focused on 3 buckets, which is like, 1 is educational. That's 1 bucket, right? 1 is actionable, right? Like step 1, step 2, step 3. 1's educational, just talking. And then the 3rd one is actually social proof. So me interviewing someone that's used my product. And that's the trifecta that he focuses on, right? And so this is kind of his, and he knows this game. And so those are 3 buckets. So you focus on those 3 buckets. And then within that, the big thing, it's just like the hook of a LinkedIn text, thumbnail design and freaking title, right? And so he basically goes into vidIQ. He looks at all these keyword titles that we can use. He looks at the score, which is basically in vidIQ, the search volume versus the number of videos that have been made for that search volume. And it tells you like, oh, this is high potential, right? Just like almost like SEO, you know? So he does that with vidIQ, and then he basically creates me the script. I read the script, we do it. He takes the video of me being recorded. He edits it. He's creating a thumbnail, adds a title, and then we're going to,
so like he has the subject matter knowledge to create a script.
Yes. For you? He uses GPT and all that. But what he also does is he creates high level bullet. So it's not me like reading exactly what he says, because I have more knowledge around each thing, but he uses some format to and he's helped grow like amazing YouTubers accounts. So I mean, I trust that's why I got him, because I'm like, oh, who's doing these accounts? Yeah. And he just does the high level bullet points, and then I riff on them, because, you know, the first recording I made, he goes, Andrew, you sound robotic. You're just reading each bullet line. And then he's like, no, don't. He's like, redo the whole thing. It's like, shit. So he's like, use those as a guide, but then add your perspective. And then I did that, and he's like 10 times better. Right. And so he creates the guide for me, and then I add my expertise. Right. And then I add my credibility at the beginning, which helps set the frame. Like you know, hey, I grew a mill. Hey, I've helped hundreds of B2B SaaS companies go to market. I sold a Bootstrapped company, blah, 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 right? So do that. And then we kind of go into it. So that sets the precedent, like, oh, okay, let me listen to this. So that's the YouTube strategy, which is a long-term game though, right? Like that's not something you're like, okay, like let's do one video and we're good. You know, it's kind of like, okay, we're in it for a while. So definitely going to do that. And then, you know, in Instagram, what I want to do in TikTok is not going to be my personal brand per se, but like my product's almost similar to Notion in a way. We've got like Notion-esque qualities, right? Basically, Notion pages add conversions on top of Notion pages, and then we're adding video, and we're basically going to be the Canva for B2B. So the goal there is I'm looking at Notion and I'm saying, holy shit, they blew up because of TikTok, believe it or not. They paid all these influencers to create these videos for them on how they use Notion to like organize their day, or like, you know, do a lemonade stand or whatever it is, right? So that is something interesting that they did. And it wasn't about the founder of Notion. I don't think he's ever even been on it, right? But they use, again, those creators, and they leverage them to do that. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm actually toying with that right now as well, right? Versus it being about me, being more about like, oh, here's creators. But anyways, wrapping this all in, if you have this production machine of multiple channels, I feel like the hub of where I'm going to actually push all this stuff out is my newsletter, right? Which has like 28,000 subscribers now. So when this is done recorded, it's going to get edited. I'm going to shoot it out, right? And then that's going to get a link click to the YouTube actual video from the newsletter for people that are interested, right? So, and then that will essentially be my hub to drive every type of content I create in all these channels, right? And so for you, dude, I don't know if you've thought about this, but like Adam's newsletter or something like that, and have it as a central hub.
Yeah, I had a newsletter. I'm just trying to do one thing at a time.
that's
so I had a newsletter, and I had this guy ghost writing it, and he was just like taking other video content I was creating. He never got my voice right. I sounded like a 20-year-old make money from home guy. It was all about I just stopped it. Because I wanted to get really good on LinkedIn first. So I started working with Alec, and it's like, I want to get this Chris Walker machine of like a lot of content getting filmed and cut and put in all different places and like whatever else going. And then I think it's like probably something like whatever. But like, dude, there's just no question that if you're selling the thing, you need to be the best. That's my opinion, just based on what I've seen and how it's resonating with the unfair advantage is that me and Santosh and Diane write a posting at least. So all of this I want to do at some point. All of this I'll definitely be doing at some point. It's just a matter of when. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like my motto for 2024 is do fewer things way better. You know, and across the country.
I agree. And I think what's a big mistake, like I think that a lot of people make, is trying to do too much, right? And you just heard me, right? You know, I feel like I've got a good traction on LinkedIn. Is it perfect? No. But is it good enough? Yes, for me to start playing with the other stuff, right? And figuring out what that is, which I think is video is kind of where I'm starting to play now, right? But one, the big mistake that I see a lot of people make is they're like, well, hey, I started on LinkedIn. It's not working for me. I'm going to go do Twitter now too. And it's like, no,
right.
LinkedIn's not broken, like LinkedIn,
right.
like LinkedIn's not broken. You have to spend at least like months trying to figure it out. Like it took me like a year before I started,
I mean, just audience, you heard two people say it. It took me a year before clicked. The whole first 8-9 months, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but something is wrong about this. And then I met with Alec, and it's like really good templates, really good headlines, really good idea generation between the two of us, and a change in audience, which that's unique to my situation. I started selling buyer, and now I can confidently say, man, it's crushing. And then I can't even, it's going to be right. But I still haven't made the video machine what I want to make it yet. So I'm not going to do anything else. But like, if you start out on this journey, I think a ghostwriter can get you started, but like, it's not going to really work for you until you really understand and it works for every person for a different, like I couldn't do what Chase Diamond did. It work a little bit, but it's not going to get, he went from like 30 to 200. It's like, if I posted the same shit, it wouldn't get, I'm not a copywriting. Copywriting. If he wrote about B2B sales, it wouldn't get the same track because he didn't bootstrap a SaaS start, right? Like, so like you got to figure out your voice.
And it takes iteration.
And that takes
iteration. And dude, like I'm bullish obviously on this whole founder brand thing, right? And I think it's on LinkedIn, it's arbitrage, right? It's like,
it is arbitrage right now. If you can do it really well,
it's arbitrage. Like look at, I have multiple friends. Like I built whole companies off of just LinkedIn. Friends, you yourself, right? Like it's arbitrage. Why do you think some of these founders just aren't like doing anything? I'm surprised not every founder is like doing something about this.
So I'll say a few things. Number one, the reason I was hesitant to start posting on LinkedIn, which I may have said in the last, I was like, if I reflect on my journey as an entrepreneur, I now know what I'm good at. And the things that I know I'm good at, I'm so much better than I was 10 years ago that it's not even funny. I would not give that person 10 years ago $1 to go do anything. I made a conscious decision in 2012 not to be on social media in my personal. So I don't engage with it. I was sitting there 18 months ago thinking, like I kind of get why this works because I've watched myself become by influence, right? Like I fell into this guy, Mitch Harper's info funnel. He co-founded Big Commerce. So I thought he moved up market against Shopify, and I was trying to move up market and email him the guy. And I ended up paying $4,000 a month to this guy for an hour of his time, for 12 months, right? Like that, it's crazy, right? Like it's totally insane. And like he was basically a therapist that I could have paid, $150 an hour to like, make me feel good. The funny thing is my brother sent me a webinar of this guy in my company at the time. Robly Email Marketing was an example that he used of what not. So my brother's like, dude, like this guy's out here. I don't think he knows you. He's just like saying what you're doing is stupid. I'd like paid a Facebook ads agency to like try to serve at, a Facebook ads agency will just tell you that I was trying, as basically his argument was like, this is like a stick it in thing. It's like, this company needs to serve me content and build trust. That was one of his slides in this webinar. I actually liked the webinar. So I told my brother, I'm like, hey man, like, do you want to just split this $3,000 and like see what this guy has to say? So I watched all his courses and I really liked his courses too. Like some, it's but I liked what he had to say. So much so that I'm like, man, like this guy's journey is like what I'm trying to create for myself. He could probably be pretty helpful. And I asked my brother, my brother's like, if he's willing to like actually talk to you and think about it, other than like, that's what you pay for a private equity advisor, like that, right? Might as well try it. 3-month commitment. Who cares? So craziest thing was, which is what made me obsessed with video and somehow doing this, right? Was I get on a Zoom call with this guy and it is I felt like I knew everything about him. I knew where he vacationed. I knew his wife. I knew what his house looked like. I knew what he did in his free time. And like, he's talking to me like I'm a total fucking stranger. You know what I mean? And like, it was the strangest imbalance. It was the strangest imbalance in a conversation I've ever had in my life. And from that moment on, I was like, I don't know how I am going to capture this power at some point, but I know that it's real because it's happening to me right now. And when the opportunity presents itself, I'm going to learn how to do this and use it.
Yeah.
So like that was the seed that got planted.
Yeah.
Right. I would have bought anything that guy recommended, I would have done, and I knew it because anything that he said I did, and most of it didn't work. Right. So fast forward to the beginning of last year, I'm like talking to Patrick Campbell, who did a decent job with Founder Brand. He's like, dude, like if you're really going for it, I think it's super helpful. Otherwise, it can just be, he's like, I didn't mind creating content because in my former life, I created a lot of content. So it comes very naturally to me to start speaking. A lot of people it doesn't, I hear, and it's just, they don't fuck it. So he's like, given that, if you're really going for it, I'd do it. If you're not going for it, I'd maybe just like focus. If you're like trying to create like, So I thought cool, but he's like, read the book Gerhardt wrote, Founder Brand. And then Gerhardt writes this book and it so clearly articulates why excellent. His to-dos were what I had a problem with. And this is back to what we were talking about originally. The reason I wasn't doing it is because I know what I'm good at. And I'm so much better at what I'm good at than stuff that I know nothing about, that like, I'm not going to try to tweet again. I'm not, Gerhardt's like, oh yeah, just put some time in your calendar and like start tweeting every day. It's like, I'm not going to waste my time trying to tweet against the LeBron James of tweeting, who's been tweeting for 20 years and knows how to just run me over. Tweeting. Like that's going to be a waste. So long story short, eventually like the Triple Whale guys convinced me that LinkedIn was a place to start. And Tommy, their former head of social, he's like, I'll write for you, have an agency on the side. And then I didn't really like what was being written, not necessarily because of Tommy, but because I just didn't feel like it was authentic to me. I didn't feel like I was the guy to educate direct to consumer e-commerce businesses on anything. There's one very specific part of email that I know more than anybody about, but I do not know how to optimize a landing page. I don't know how to make an email convert better for them. Why would I be writing? And then the more people I talk to, it's like, well, you know what I do know about? My own business. So here we go. Open kimono. I'm going to just share literally everything about this journey. And that sort of led to the show. And then, you know, I ran into Alec and he's like, dude, like, well, you can generate real leads with this machine. Right? Like I'm doing it for my whatever, how many other clients he has. It's like, there's literally a motion that we do that is repeatable, that works. And I'm like, well, that's the reason that I'm doing this, right? Like I'm not doing it famous. I'm not.
It's a tool. It's a tool.
So started working with him and then this didn't really work for D2C. And then like it appears as though it's, so here we are. So like that's the very short answer is the reason I didn't do it was because I was so scared to start because I felt like I knew nothing about it. And I would, and just to, not to say that this is the right way to grow a following, but like, I'm like, I wrote the first, if you look at my LinkedIn, you go all the way back, it's like, I'm going to start posting. And like, I spent an hour writing this post about like how I was at this event and this crazy thing happened. Like I said what I did at this mastermind. And like, I was on stage with this other guy. And for 45 minutes, people were just like so captivated by what company does that they didn't like spend an hour writing about this. I'm like, maybe the 2 likes. And then Tommy comes the next day and reposts some screenshot of a tweet and it got like 1,000 likes. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, this is exactly why I'm hiring this guy. So my point is, I think you can get started with a ghostwriter if you're just terrified, but like it will behoove you, in my opinion, to really try. The reason I want to work with Alec is like, I want to learn how to write this stuff. And I think that's like, it hurts sometimes. It's really hard to write for me sometimes, but like I wanted to learn how the machine actually, and what is actually good content and what can actually pull a real audience selling, and blah, 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 you know?
It comes down, I think, a lot with most people that start is imposter. It's that imposter syndrome, right? It's like, shit, I don't know, like what's going on here? And then you get like 3 likes when you start, and then you're like, shit, but this like guy who's like, I have more accolades than is getting thousands. What the hell is happening, right? Like, and you're like, shit, and then you go down this spiral and it sucks. And I think everyone really goes through that experience initially, right? Until you figure out part of the game. I didn't Triple Whale start on Twitter. In
their entire whole, I don't think they did anything other than Twitter for 10 million, first 10 million. So they basically were D2C guys in their last business, and they had this attribution problem, which they thought sucked because they couldn't figure out it took them forever to figure out whether their Facebook or Google ads were. So the way they're these Orthodox Jewish guys, they were selling hair, right? They were selling these clip-on braids. The way they distributed that was through a micro influencer strategy, and they had 7,000 people creating UGC.
7,000
So
on Twitter.
their idea, Yeah, their idea was in general. It was mostly Instagram with the DTC, but they would just give away free hair for people to like. So their idea was, can we recreate that machine in D2C Twitter? Because that's where everybody's hanging out. So they got a bunch of people on board, gave them advisory shares, and they're like, once a week, we will send you product. And the product was a feature. So once a week, all of these D2C influencers were tweeting about to their audiences this update in their software that happened. And it just created this massive thing. I mean, massive, whatever. They're, it's incredible.
Wow.
They started.
And they just did it all the same day, gave them an advisory share and one. Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. Crazy.
Yeah. They set up a cadence where I don't know whether it was once a week, once a 2 weeks, once every month, where there was a tweet storm about their company. And it was either features or content or whatever, but they got people to agree in advance. We're at 10:38 a.m. on Friday, you are going to retweet them. And then boom, everyone's feed turns. Who cares about DC? Yeah. I haven't really tried yet, but I'm trying in another way.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, right? Is like, I would love to figure out something like that on LinkedIn. And I don't know anyone that's done it well on LinkedIn.
Well, that's the only company. I mean, some people have followed along and done it for launches and financing announcements, but I don't think anyone, but by the way, like after Triple Whale did it, like everyone's trying to copy the playbook. So these people only have so much bandwidth. You know what I mean? They're like,
yeah.
Right. They're like, I'm not going to, but that's the only example of that I found. But it's like you said, it was an arbitrage. And now it's like, maybe the window's open a little, but like it was the original creative thought that got them this place. And that was where the art at that time. Right. So for me, I think the arbitrage is this LinkedIn stuff. Maybe it goes away at some point, but like, I think the farther I get along, if I'm still willing to share all of our financial details, like it will probably become even more, or even more credible.
When do you think you're going to stop sharing financial detail?
I think when somebody forces me to, like, if we take like 100 million in secondary from someone and they're like, stop doing that. Like,
okay.
Are you sure about that? But like,
yeah. Interesting.
I would love to keep doing it. Like my goal, I would love to bootstrap, meaning no primary capital into the business. Like I'm allowed to sell shares, but bootstrap to 100 million ARR. I think it would be sick post 100 million when that, like that.
That graph at 100 mil. Yeah. That would be sick. Yeah. That would be awesome. One of the MailChimp's kind of anomaly, right? They were bootstrapped, but they started back.
Yeah. Truly bootstrapped.
Yeah. And then I think a kind of a modern day one is ClickFunnels, right? Like didn't Russell Brunson,
I don't know. I'm sure they're at 100 million by now. They don't really talk about it that much, but that was one. Klaviyo raised a bunch of primary and secondary, but they didn't spend any of it. They only burnt 15 million. And the only reason they burnt it is because they were trying to accelerate growth into their IPO.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have otherwise. They were profitable the entire way up. Then they went big burn last year, and then they fired 20% of their workforce so that they could keep paying for the marketing and still say that's like, and they raised prices 25 in September. So like that combination like worked. But that's pretty good, dude. 550 million ARR, only burned 15 in 8 years. And it all came last year.
That's crazy.
That's close. There's like Bessemer has one. It's like an infrastructure SaaS. They've been giving secondary to that is still bootstrapped. SEMrush was an IPO. They only took secondary. So like that's still bootstrapped.
Yeah.
They got to like 300 million ARR.
Wow.
So it's possible, it's just, I think the problem is like the company gets so valuable at some point, and then there can be this thing where it's like Qualtrics was like 40 million top line, 30 million bottom line before they raised venture, but then they raised venture and sold it. I think that can also happen. It's like, dude, if you just actually really, really went for this, then maybe it's something ginormous, Did
you see Atlassian bought Loom for 975 mil cash?
35 million ARR.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's insane.
30.
Yeah. What is that, like 30x multiple or something like that? That's that's insane.
It's a reason to try to go really PLG, because like, if you really do that's I was just on the podcast of a guy he's got this podcast called churn.fm, and he was employee 20 at Hotjar, their journey with this whole PLG thing, and he's like, look, it seems like noise in the beginning, but like, he's like, it's actually like kindling that gets the fire going.
Yeah.
You know, like just having a massive amount of users, you know, whether they're annoying or your ICP or like whatever or not, like it's just so valuable.
Yeah. It's insane. I think that they had 25 million users, Lou. They have 25 million users, which is like, if you think about that, that's freaking one in every, 10, however many people in the US, like you're using that, like 10% of people in the US size, like that's crazy.
Yeah. 120K paying.
This is crazy, man. Well, Adam, dude, this has been a good session, man. Well, you're the man, dude. I'll talk to you soon. Let me know. I'll talk to you, man. All right, bro.
Take care.
Later.